In the blazing silence of an ancient desert, a woman wept alone. No title, no crown, no tribe to claim her. She was cast out, forgotten, a servant turned wanderer. Yet, out of all creation, heaven chose to speak to her. How did a dejected Egyptian woman capture the gaze of the Almighty? Why did God call her by name, Hagar, when prophets and kings trembled for such honor? And what really transpired in that wilderness, beneath the relentless sun, that birthed the name El-Roi? The God who sees me? History remembers Abraham. Faith remembers Sarah. But few ever speak of the woman who saw God and lived. What did she encounter in the wastelands that both the church and the mosque have veiled in silence? What ancient truth lies buried beneath the sands of Beersheba? A truth that could rewrite the story of faith itself? This is the story of Hagar, the forgotten visionary of God. The desert was silent, a silence so deep it seemed to breathe. Winds curled around endless dunes like unseen spirits, shaping and reshaping the earth with every sigh. Beneath the rising sun, a lone figure stumbled through the sand. A woman draped in torn linen, her face veiled against the heat. Her name was Hagar, once a servant, now a shadow fleeing her own life. Each step sank into dust as if the world itself tried to erase her. But how could heaven forget the woman it called by name? Before the desert, there was the tent, Abraham's camp, filled with laughter, tension, and prophecy. Hagar had served Sarah, the barren wife of the patriarch, obeying every word without question. Yet service had become a prison. When Sarah offered her to Abraham to bear a son, Hagar's obedience turned into sacrifice. She carried life within her, but it was not hers to claim. Every glance from Sarah burned like desert sun, reminding her that even blessings can become burdens when born in bondage. The moment Hagar conceived, the camp changed. Sarah's smile hardened. Her eyes, once filled with hope, now glimmered with jealousy. "Do you see her?" the women whispered. "She walks differently now, like she carries more than a child." Hagar's pride began to rise. She was no longer just a servant. She was the mother of Abraham's son. But in her pride came her punishment. Words turned to quarrels. Quarrels turned to cruelty. Until one night, under the cold gleam of the moon, Sarah's voice pierced her heart. "Leave my sight." And Hagar ran. The wind howled like an unseen judge as Hagar fled the camp. She did not look back. Her tears mixed with dust. She had no food, no water, only the fire of anger and the ache of rejection. In every direction stretched an ocean of sand. The stars watched without blinking. The earth offered no path. She whispered, half to herself, half to the heavens, "Does anyone see me?" But silence was her only answer. By dawn, her body trembled. The child within her stirred weakly. Then, in the distance, a glimmer, a spring of water beneath a lone acacia tree. Hagar collapsed beside it, her fingers trembling as she scooped water to her lips. The sound of flowing water was the first mercy she had known in days. Yet as she drank, the air around her shifted. The wind grew still. The desert seemed to hold its breath. From the still air came a voice, gentle, radiant, and terrifying. "Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She froze. No human had ever spoken her name with such weight. She looked around, trembling. "I am fleeing my mistress, Sarah," she whispered. The voice, calm yet commanding, replied, "Return to her. Submit again. For through your son shall come a multitude too great to count." A tear rolled down her face. Was this mercy or another trial? Then the voice spoke again, softer now. "You shall call his name Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction." Hagar fell to her knees. In that moment, the desert no longer felt empty. She realized she was not unseen, not forgotten, not forsaken. Her lips formed words that would echo through eternity. "You are El-Roi, the God who sees me." The wind carried her cry across the dunes, a sound of worship born from pain. As the sun rose, Hagar rose with it. She pressed her hand upon her belly. A promise now lived inside her. The wilderness that once sought to bury her had become her altar. She turned toward the horizon, her eyes steady, her heart unbroken. The desert had spoken her name, and heaven had answered. And somewhere beyond the dunes, the story of two nations had already begun, because if the desert could speak, it would tell of the woman God saw first. Her story is not of power, but of being seen. Subscribe now, whilst we delve into the servant of Sarah, where the roots of destiny take shape within the walls of Abraham's tent. Before she ever knew the tents of Abraham, Hagar belonged to Egypt, a land of gods, palaces, and bondage. She had once walked among stone idols and golden halls, yet found herself sold to a nomadic couple wandering under the stars. She was young then, barely a woman. Her eyes carried the reflection of the Nile, deep, sorrowful, enduring. She had learned early that the world never asks permission before it takes. When she was given to Sarah, she bowed low, hiding both her pride and her past beneath silence. But destiny had already chosen her for a story greater than her chains. Years passed under the soft glow of oil lamps and whispered prayers. Sarah's laughter had grown thin. Her womb remained silent. Each passing season deepened her ache. One night, her voice trembled with decision. "Take my maid, Abraham. Let her bear the child I cannot." The words hung heavy, wrapped in faith yet rooted in despair. Hagar did not speak. She only lowered her eyes. Obedience was safer than resistance. Yet as Abraham reached for her hand, she wondered, could love ever be born from arrangement? The night was quiet when she entered Abraham's tent. No vows, no ceremony, only the heavy scent of incense and destiny. Abraham's face was kind, but weary. He carried the weight of promise and prophecy. To him, this was obedience to divine delay. To her, it was surrender without choice. When the dawn came, she walked out with the knowledge that her life was no longer her own. Within her grew a child, not born of freedom, but of divine design. At first, Sarah watched from afar. Her heart wavered between hope and resentment. When Hagar's belly began to swell, the camp rejoiced. The promise had come, but soon Sarah's smile faded. Each time she saw Hagar's hand rest on her stomach, a sting burned inside her. Hagar began to walk taller, unaware that her very joy had become a thorn. The more Sarah wept in silence, the more her servant shone in pride, and jealousy became the invisible fire between them. Whispers crept through the tents. "She will bear the heir. She has done what the mistress could not." Those words, though never spoken before Sarah, reached her ears like arrows. Hagar began to feel a strange authority. The once silent servant now looked upon Sarah with a subtle smirk of triumph. But pride in the heart of the powerless is fragile. And soon, that pride would become the very reason for her fall. Sarah's patience broke like a brittle thread. She cornered Hagar one morning as the sun burned red across the sky. "Do you think your womb makes you greater than me?" she cried. Hagar's reply came sharp, almost involuntary. "I carry what you begged for." The words struck like thunder. Silence followed, then the sting of a hand across her face. Hagar fled into the shadows of the dunes, clutching her belly, her tears mingling with the sand. That night, Abraham found Sarah alone, trembling. She spoke with guilt, yet bitterness lingered. "She despised me, and I have wronged her." Abraham, torn between peace and promise, could only whisper, "Do as you see fit." The tent lights flickered, and beyond their reach, Hagar sat alone under the stars. She whispered to her unborn child, "Your name will be Ishmael, for surely, if no one else hears me, God must." The desert, for the first time, seemed to listen. Days later, Hagar's absence from the camp was noticed. The servants whispered again, but this time in fear. Sarah avoided Abraham's gaze. Abraham prayed in silence. And somewhere beyond the dunes, a lone woman walked with swollen feet and burning hope. The winds carried her name, Hagar. The story that began in servitude was already turning toward the spring of revelation. The camp slept, but Hagar's heart could not. Each whisper, each cold glance from Sarah had become a blade cutting deeper into her spirit. She lay awake, listening to the distant bleating of sheep and the soft murmur of night winds against the tent. Her child kicked beneath her ribs, a reminder of life, yet also of exile. When dawn touched the horizon, she could bear it no more. Wrapping her veil tightly, she stepped out into the cold desert air. Without a word, she fled. At first, the wind was gentle, carrying the faint smell of dust and salt. The dunes glowed gold beneath the morning sun. For the first time, no one called her name, no master gave her orders. Freedom, she thought, felt like silence. But with every mile, the silence grew heavier. Her sandals tore, her throat burned, her feet bled. Still she pressed on. She would rather die a free woman than live as a forgotten servant. As she walked, the mirage of memory shimmered before her eyes. She saw Egypt, the marble halls, the scent of myrrh, the voice of her mother singing by the river. She saw Abraham's face, kind, but distant, and Sarah's eyes, sharp, haunted, full of a pain she had never understood until now. The past clung to her like heat. Each image faded into sand until only the sound of her heartbeat remained. The sun climbed high, ruthless and unblinking. The ground burned her feet. The sky spun above her. Her skin blistered beneath the fire of heaven. Her lips cracked. Her breath came dry and ragged. "Why, Lord?" she murmured. "If you see all things, do you see me?" But the desert gave no answer. Only wind, hot, hollow, and endless. By nightfall, she found a dry ravine. The stars glimmered coldly above, indifferent witnesses to her suffering. She lay down against a rock, arms wrapped around her stomach. The child stirred, faint, but alive. Tears fell silently into the sand. She whispered, "Ishmael, my son, if I perish, remember this, your mother did not bow to despair." Her voice was weak, yet the desert listened. The next day blurred into haze. Hunger clawed at her. The spring she hoped to find was nowhere. At last her legs gave out. She fell face first into the sand. The heat pressed down like a living weight. Her mind drifted between dream and death, visions of water, light, and wings. And then, silence. She thought it was the end. But as she lay still, the air began to move differently. The wind that once scorched now cooled her brow. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the faint sound of water. She opened her eyes. The world shimmered with light. It was not a mirage. It was a whisper, a call. And through that silence came a voice, clear, gentle, and eternal. Hagar, her name, spoken by the heavens. She lifted her head. Before her stood a radiant presence. Neither man nor shadow, but light made form. "Hagar, servant of Sarah," the voice said, "where have you come from and where are you going?" Tears filled her eyes. "I am fleeing from my mistress," she whispered. The being's gaze held compassion, not judgment. "Return to her, for through your child shall come a great nation. His name shall be Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your cry." In that moment the desert transformed. The heat no longer burned, it glowed. The silence no longer mocked, it spoke. Hagar fell to her knees and wept. She had fled from pain and found purpose. She had been unseen, and now she was known. The air trembled around her as if the desert itself bowed. Before Hagar stood a presence too brilliant for mortal sight. Not thunder, not flame, but gentleness made of light. She shielded her eyes, trembling. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Who are you?" The figure did not move closer. It only spoke with a voice that felt like both wind and water. "I am the messenger of the Most High," it said, "sent to you, Hagar." The desert, once endless and cruel, now pulsed with life. For the first time, heaven had stepped into the wilderness for her. "Hagar, servant of Sarah," the angel's voice continued, "where have you come from, and where are you going?" The question was not for knowledge, it was for her soul. She lowered her head. The words came out broken. "I flee from my mistress." Her confession echoed between the dunes. The angel was silent for a moment, and in that silence, she felt her shame dissolve. No accusation followed, only understanding. Sometimes, mercy begins not with answers but with being seen. Then the angel spoke again. "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." The words pierced her like arrows. "Return to the same tent that cast her out?" Tears welled in her eyes. "How can I return to what broke me?" she whispered. The angel's gaze softened. "Because you will not return the same. You have been chosen, and the child within you carries a promise." The desert wind brushed against her face. No longer dry, but warm, like a breath of hope. "Behold," said the angel, "you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction." Hagar's tears fell freely now. Every word sounded like music she had never heard before, a melody only heaven could compose. "He shall be as a wild man," the angel continued, "his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him. Yet he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." In that prophecy, she heard both warning and wonder, the birth of a nation within her own sorrow. When the angel's voice faded, the desert grew still again. But the stillness was not empty anymore. It was full. Hagar fell to her knees and looked at the sky, her lips trembling. "You are the God who sees me," she said softly. "El-Roi." The name echoed through the sands like thunder disguised as tenderness. She realized she was the first woman in Scripture to name God. Not from comfort, but from exile. Not from joy, but from being seen in suffering. And in that revelation, she became more than a servant. She became chosen. She looked around and saw the spring glistening beside her, a pool of water shimmering like glass. She cupped it in her hands, staring at her reflection. "This is the well of the living one who sees me," she whispered. The water cooled her lips, her spirit, her memory. It would forever be called El-Roi, the well of the God who lives and sees me. The same sand that had hidden her steps now glowed like a temple floor beneath her feet. Morning rose golden over the dunes. Hagar wrapped her veil, steadied her breath, and turned back toward the land she had fled. Each step homeward was an act of faith, not submission to Sarah, but obedience to God. She no longer walked in fear. She walked as one who had been seen. The spring's water shimmered behind her, marking the place where heaven had met earth. Even the wind seemed to carry her name differently now, softer, sacred, eternal. As she disappeared over the horizon, the desert returned to silence. But somewhere beneath its endless sands, her footprints remained, the traces of a woman who met God where no one thought he would come. The well she left behind would outlive kings, prophets, and empires, and every droplet of that water would whisper her name, Hagar, the one who was seen. When Hagar stepped once more into the camp of Abraham, the servants froze. No one expected her return, not the woman who had fled into death's embrace. But there she stood, veiled in calm resolve, her eyes deep as the desert that birthed her strength. Sarah's face tightened. Abraham's heart ached. Yet he saw something different in her, a peace beyond defiance. No one knew what had happened in the wilderness. Only Hagar did. Only she had heard the voice that called her name. Months later, her cries echoed through the tent as life broke from pain. Abraham entered to find her holding a newborn son, his small hands clutching at the air. She looked up and whispered, "His name is Ishmael, for the Lord has heard." Abraham nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. He held the boy close and whispered a blessing. The camp rejoiced. For a moment joy reigned. The promise seemed fulfilled. But peace in Abraham's household was always a fragile guest. Sarah watched from afar as Hagar nursed her child. Every coo, every laugh of the baby was a reminder of what she did not have. The laughter that once defined her name, Sarah, had vanished. And Hagar, though humble in appearance, could not hide her glow. She had carried a prophecy in her womb. How could she not shine? Each passing day deepened the divide. The tents stood close, but the hearts within them were worlds apart. Years passed. Ishmael grew strong, wild, fearless, and free. His laughter rolled like thunder through the camp. His feet knew every path of the wilderness. Abraham loved the boy deeply. He saw in Ishmael both his legacy and his youth. But with each year, Sarah's heart sank lower. For though she had grown old, hope still burned, and it would soon burst into miracle. Until then, Ishmael's presence was a living tension, a reminder of divine timing yet unfinished. Then came the impossible. Sarah's barren womb stirred. Her laughter returned, not bitter this time, but astonished. When Isaac was born, Abraham's tent erupted with joy. Yet beneath the celebration lay something unspoken. 2 sons, 2 destinies. Hagar watched the feast from a distance, her heart torn between wonder and fear. The child she once bore as the heir was now a shadow beside the new promise. And she knew that in houses where destiny divides, peace cannot stay for long. The day Isaac was weaned, Abraham made a great feast. All came to rejoice, all except Hagar, who lingered at the edge of the crowd. Ishmael, now a young boy, laughed and played, his voice echoing through the tents. But one laugh pierced differently. Sarah heard it and froze. To her ears it sounded like mockery, like threat. "Cast out this bondwoman and her son," she said to Abraham that night. The words fell like stones. Hagar's world, once built by faith, began to tremble again. Abraham sat in silence, torn between 2 loves, the son of his strength and the son of his promise. He walked out beneath the stars, the same stars that once spoke of nations. His prayer was a cry without words. And God said to him, "Let it not be grievous in your sight, for in Isaac shall your seed be called. Yet I will make of the bondwoman's son a nation also, because he is your seed." Tears blurred Abraham's eyes. He knew what he must do. The next morning he called for Hagar. He placed a waterskin and bread in her hands. His gaze lingered on the boy, his firstborn, his blood. Hagar's heart pounded. She could not speak. Ishmael clung to his father's robe, confused and afraid. Abraham knelt and kissed his son's forehead. "God is with you," he whispered. As the dawn rose, Hagar turned away, again a wanderer. The desert awaited her, vast and merciless. But this time, she did not fear the wilderness, because she knew the desert was not empty. It was where God had spoken her name. The sun rose pale and cold. The camp stirred with muted whispers, but Hagar's tent was silent. She sat with her back to the world, clutching Ishmael's small hand. Abraham stood before her, a shadow in the morning light. Neither spoke. He placed the waterskin and a bundle of bread beside her. His eyes glistened, torn between obedience and heartbreak. "God will be with you," he said softly. Hagar wanted to hate him, but sorrow swallowed her anger. She lifted Ishmael onto her shoulder and walked away without looking back. The second exile had begun. The desert of Beersheba stretched endlessly before them, a vast ocean of silence. The sky burned white, and the sand beneath their feet shimmered like glass. At first they walked with hope. Hagar remembered the voice by the spring years ago, El-Roi, the God who sees me. Surely he would see her again. But as the hours passed, the heat thickened, and the water skin grew lighter. Ishmael's laughter faded into dry coughs. Even faith began to crack beneath the weight of thirst. By midday, the last drop of water was gone. Hagar tore a strip from her robe and wiped Ishmael's cracked lips. But it did nothing. "Mother, I am thirsty," he whispered. Her heart splintered. She lifted him gently, his head falling limp against her shoulder. The desert wind howled as if mourning with her. She stumbled onward, her shadow shrinking beneath the merciless sun. With every step, she prayed, but the heavens stayed silent. When she could walk no more, she found a dry bush, a dying thorn in the midst of death. She laid Ishmael beneath it and stepped back. "I cannot watch the boy die," she said aloud, her voice trembling. She walked a short distance away, far enough not to hear his cries, yet close enough to feel them. Then she fell to the ground and wept. Her tears darkened the sand. Her sobs mingled with Ishmael's faint voice. And the desert, for the second time, bore witness to her breaking. Then came a sound, faint, tender, like the stirring of a breeze. "Hagar!" A voice called from above. "What troubles you?" She froze, tears still on her cheeks. "Do not be afraid," the voice continued, "for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is." Her breath caught. She looked toward Ishmael, his eyes half open, his lips murmuring in fevered prayer. "Arise," the voice said. "Lift up the lad and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." The wind shifted. The air smelled of rain. She lifted her eyes and saw it, a shimmer of light in the sand, a pool where moments before there had been none. She fell to her knees and crawled to it. Cool, clear water burst from the earth, spilling over her hands. She drank. Then she ran to Ishmael, pressing the water to his lips. He stirred. His eyes opened. He drank. Laughter broke from her chest. Wild, disbelieving, holy. The desert that once starved her now gave life. And the God who had seen her once had seen her again. When Ishmael regained his strength, Hagar held him tightly. "You are not forgotten," she whispered. "Your name means God hears, and he has heard you again." She taught him to draw water from the well, to hunt, to live by the strength of the earth. Each day they grew, not in comfort but in resilience. The wilderness became their home, and the voice of God became their inheritance. Hagar no longer feared the silence. She had learned that in silence, heaven speaks the loudest. Years passed beneath the same endless sky. Ishmael grew tall, strong, and fierce, a son of the desert. He became an archer, his arrows flying swift as wind, his spirit unbroken. Hagar watched him with quiet pride. Every arrow he loosed was a song of survival, a testament to faith born from tears. In the wilderness of Paran, she built a life, and God was with them. The woman once cast out had become the matriarch of a nation, and the desert that nearly killed her now echoed with her son's laughter. The desert winds had shaped Ishmael into their likeness, fierce, untamed, and free. He moved like the wind that raised him, his bow slung across his shoulder, his eyes keen as a hawk's. Hagar watched from the shade of a palm, her heart swelling with both pride and prophecy. The boy who once thirsted unto death now ruled the wilderness around him. Every time he drew his bowstring, it sang of survival, a melody heaven had written through his mother's tears. Years passed, and the well that had saved them became their home. Travelers came and went, speaking of Abraham, of Isaac, of promises fulfilled far away. Hagar poured water for the weary and offered shelter to wanderers. Many did not know her story, that the spring at which they drank was born of mercy, not chance. When they thanked her, she only smiled and said, "It is not I who gave this water, it is the God who sees." Her voice carried peace. Her eyes carried history. One night, as stars spilled across the black sky, Hagar knelt beside the well. She remembered the angel's words, "I will make him a great nation." Could it truly be so? She looked toward Ishmael, asleep beneath a woven mat of reeds, and whispered, "Lord, I believe you. Even if I never see it, let it be." Faith for her was not comfort. It was continuation. She had nothing left to prove, only promises to preserve. Beyond the horizon, Abraham raised Isaac under the tents of Canaan, while Hagar raised Ishmael under the open skies. 2 sons, one born of covenant, one of compassion, both carrying the same blood, both marked by destiny. The world would remember one as promise, the other as nation. But heaven made no mistake. Each child bore a purpose. Isaac to continue the line of promise, Ishmael to father kings of the desert. Their paths diverged, yet their stories remained bound by the same breath of God. Years later, Abraham's caravan appeared on the horizon. Hagar's breath caught when she saw the familiar figure dismount, aged, yet radiant with peace. He greeted Ishmael with open arms, blessing him in the name of the Almighty. For a moment, the wounds of parting healed. They spoke little, but their silence carried forgiveness. When Abraham left, he looked back once, his eyes lingering on the well. Perhaps he knew. This was where faith and exile had met and become one. As Ishmael grew to manhood, Hagar sought him a wife from her homeland, Egypt, where her own story had begun. When the caravan returned, the young woman stepped forth, her eyes bright with strength. The tents of Paran once again filled with laughter and the scent of bread baking on stones. Hagar, now older, watched them together and whispered, "The Lord has restored what the world tried to take." Her son had found a future. The promise was alive. From Ishmael would come 12 princes, 12 tribes that would stretch from the Red Sea to the far deserts of Arabia. Their names would echo through time, their banners lifted against the sky. They would become warriors, builders, wanderers, children of freedom, born of a woman once bound. And through them, Hagar's name would be carried in both faiths and legends. What began as rejection had become revelation. The servant had birthed nations. In the stillness of twilight, Hagar stood by the well, her hair streaked with gray, her spirit untouched by despair. She looked toward the horizon where Isaac's land lay beyond sight. 2 nations, 2 brothers, 2 divine promises. Not enemies, but mirrors of heaven's justice. The wind carried her whisper, "Let peace be between them," and the desert answered with silence, the kind of silence that keeps secrets until the end of time. The story of one woman had become the balance of the world. The years had carved soft lines upon Hagar's face, yet her eyes still held the glow of the desert dawn. The wilderness of Paran stretched endlessly before her, golden and vast, whispering with memory. She sat beside the same well that once saved her life, the same spring where heaven had spoken her name. Ishmael's laughter echoed in the distance. Deeper now, the voice of a man, and Hagar smiled, knowing her story had come full circle. Once a servant, then a wanderer, now a matriarch of a promise fulfilled. She drew a cup of water from the well and gazed into it. The reflection rippled, her own face, aged yet radiant. The desert sun shimmered above her, and for a moment, she saw herself as she once was, young, frightened, running through endless sands. Her hands trembled slightly. "This water," she whispered, "still remembers the tears that birthed it." Every droplet was a testimony, not of wealth, nor of victory, but of survival. Some miracles do not end. They flow through generations. As the wind calmed, the silence deepened, not empty, but sacred. Hagar closed her eyes and listened, and there it was again, the same voice that had met her years ago in despair. "Hagar," her breath caught. "I have never left you," the voice said. "From the well of your tears, I made rivers for your descendants." Her heart trembled with awe. The same God who found her in exile still walked beside her. He was the God of beginnings and of every return. Ishmael came and knelt beside her, his tall frame shadowing hers. "Mother," he said softly, "our people have grown. The tribes have spread across the lands. The wells are many." She reached up and touched his cheek. "Then remember this," she said. "Every well began with faith. Every nation began with tears." He bowed his head, and for the first time, she saw not a boy, but a leader, the embodiment of the promise she once doubted. The child who cried under a thorn bush had become the strength of nations. Sometimes, as she looked to the north, she thought of Sarah. Two women, bound by the same man, broken by the same promise, healed by the same God. Hagar no longer held bitterness. She had seen too much mercy to cling to pain. "I understand you now," she whispered into the wind, as if Sarah could hear. "Your laughter came after years of silence. Mine came after years of tears. Different roads, one grace. Perhaps heaven never favored one over the other, only wrote two halves of the same story." Night fell, and the stars emerged, the same countless stars Abraham had once been shown. Hagar lay beneath them, the cool sand beneath her hands. She smiled faintly. "So many," she murmured, "just as he said." Every star above her seemed to shimmer with memory, the footsteps of prophets, the cries of mothers, the prayers of the forgotten. And among them burned one truth brighter than the rest. God does not overlook those the world forgets. The desert, in all its silence, stood as her witness. When her final dawn came, Hagar rose weakly and went to the well one last time. She drank deeply, her lips touching the water that once gave her life. The wind whispered her name. She looked toward the horizon and smiled, the same smile she gave when she first heard his voice. Her spirit lifted like the desert breeze, light and free. And when she was gone, the well shimmered brighter, as if heaven itself had stooped again to honor her memory. Centuries would pass. Empires would rise and fall. But the story of Hagar would endure, not as tragedy, but as testament. She was the first woman in Scripture to name God, the first to find him in exile, the first to learn that even the forgotten are seen. When the desert winds blow across Beersheba, they still whisper her name. And when weary souls drink from wells they did not dig, they unknowingly sip from her faith. For she met the God who sees, and through her, the world would never be unseen again.